So you want to start a Genestealer Cult army? Welcome to the fold, O worshipper of the Star Children. In deciding where best to start, we have to take into account the shifting meta, the price, absolutely the price. The cheaper it is for you, the more money you will have left for things like giving tip money to me through that Ko-fi link in the description. But also, we want to consider the lore. Your first thought with Genestealer Cult may be, so, I need Genestealers. But no. Genestealers are not and never really have been a core part of the Genestealer cults. They are a main part of another army, the Tyranids. But there are some new Genestealer models that you could get and they would be compatible with your army. But where to start, we've got to think elsewhere. With the Sisters of Battle, I said, start with the character, see if you like the character. Well, I won't be saying that this time, and there are two reasons why, but I'll mention them a bit later on. What you want is the core of the army and an acceptance that you are going to be painting some flesh colour. The main parts are acolytes and neophytes. In the lore, and I've done a video on the Genestealer Cult background and lore before, a Genestealer infects a host. The host's next child is a first-generation Acolyte hybrid. Then a child of a first-generation Acolyte hybrid and a different host is going to be a second-generation Acolyte hybrid. As in, it's 2 generations removed from the first Genestealer. Essentially the grandchild of a Genestealer. But look, there's lore behind it. The first and second generation make up the Acolytes, and they have slightly different heads, slightly different feet, but they all come in this Acolyte hybrid box. But that's not the box we're starting with. Now, as we go on through the brood cycle, we have the 3rd generation and the 4th generation. They are neophytes. They are much more human looking, although the 3rd generation has this elongated head and maybe has a claw hand, but we're looking at 2 arms then, so very human-like. And the 4th generation is very, very human-looking. They just have no hair. So you don't need to worry about painting hairstyles, just painting skin. So that's the army and the lore. Lore is great. I have a separate video on the lore. Now, the Acolyte hybrids can also be built as metamorphs, but they are a bit divergent from the core of the army. They don't have demo charges, but when a Tyranid hive fleet is approaching, this will trigger in the cult the activation of several genes, and you will get some metamorph hybrids. But they're not the core. Aberrants could be considered part of the core. They are a very strange creature. They're not any part of one generation. They are just the genetic weird dead ends that you get when you're mixing alien plus host DNA. Usually humans are the host. It doesn't always come out correctly with even 3 arms. Maybe it's 2 arms and 3 eyes. Who's to say what's normal these days? But a trunk face is not ideal. And if you had lore about your cult being near a warp storm or being part of a chaos group, then you could say that was why you get so many aberrants. Or maybe your cult has experimented a bit and tried to develop their own genetics. That's Twisted Helix style, and that's why they get so many aberrants. Like Fabius Bile. You tried, and these are, in a way, successful. So acolytes, neophytes, aberrants, they make up a good core of the army. There are other completely different styles, like going heavily into the bikes, but one of the benefits of Genestealer Cult is we don't have many units available to us, so as soon as you buy the infantry, you're getting the core of the army. Now, reason 1 that we don't start our collecting Genestealer Cult with a character is because of the limited time we have with a good deal. All of these that I've mentioned, the Acolytes, the Neophytes, the Aberrants, including the Metamorphs potentially, they come in the current combat patrol. All of these models are good. And I know that some of you veteran players will look at this and think, I know something that isn't good, but remember that meta shifts. Unlike the Sisters of Battle Combat Patrol, the models you get in the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol are not monopose. They're not one-off specials that are all put together here. They are the full kits. All of the options, all of the variation, the full shebang. Separately, the Magos is £19. The Rock Grinder is $37.50, the 5 Acolytes are $27.50, 5 Aberrants are $27.50, and the 20 Neophytes, £65. That would cost you separately £176.50, and there is quite an increased cost outside of the UK because of shipping costs, even to your local Games Workshop stores in places like Quebec, because the models are produced in the UK. The Combat Patrol costs £95. That is 40% off if you wanted all of that, but not the Magos. Including the Magos, it is 45% cheaper compared to buying them all separately, and it is even greater value with affiliate links. From Firestorm Games, 53% less than buying them separately from Games Workshop. So not £176.50, £83.60. If you're in Canada and you have never used Fenris Workshop before, it is 171 Canadian dollars, which is so much better than the roughly $350 you'd be paying to get them separately from Games Workshop. And if you were in Australia, ho, 174.52. When you compare that to the 466 Australian dollars you'd be spending if you were to get these units separately from Games Workshop. That is 62% less. Use those affiliate links in the description. Get your savings upon savings. The Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol is the only combat patrol where I would say it may be worth picking up 2 boxes, especially since this is expected to be a limited time only until a new codex comes out. I definitely wouldn't suggest picking up 2 of the Battle Sisters combat boxes. If anyone says that, that is absurd advice, terrible advice. The units in that are monopose, so you get no weapon variety with your sisters. As soon as you have 2 boxes, you have 2 sets of sisters with exactly the same weapons in exactly the same pose. You would get 2 lots of 3 Arcoflagellants. They can't be used in squads of 6. You would have to field them as 2 sets of 3. It's either 3 or 10. The Seraphim. You would have no special weapons on the Seraphim. It would all just be bolt pistols. And you couldn't field 2 sets of 5 as a set of 10 because you have 2 superiors. Same issue for the Repentia. You would have 2 sister superiors, so it doesn't quite work as a squad of 10. Genestealer Cult, you can build them however you want. And we have so much customization available that I'm going to get into. Now, we don't know if this Combat Patrol will be the same Combat Patrol box once the new codex comes out. That is going to happen in summer, Northern Hemisphere summer, 2024. We're presuming it's going to change because all of the other factions have had a change as well. The Necrons have changed, the Admech have changed, the Tyranids has changed, and the Space Marines have changed to something far, far worse as a combat patrol. This is pretty much the most expensive combat patrol there is for the models you get. And these are monopose models, so if you're buying multiple, you're not really getting any benefit. Oh, and Games Workshop gives away the Infernus Marines as a painting thing if you can coax someone else in and paint up a model. Then you can take that home, strip it, and paint it how you want. So we don't know exactly what the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol will look like in the future. It will probably look a bit like this, but with, say, a new character model instead of the Iconward, assuming we get a new character. That has kind of been the trend. Genestealer Cult just get even more characters. So it'll probably come with half the neophytes, no aberrants, and a smaller vehicle. That is my guess for what it'll look like in the future. So we've got the Combat Patrol while we could. This one, the good one. How are we going to use the units in the Combat Patrol? So even though the Combat Patrol box is going to have a lot of instructions on, hey, you've got 5 Acolytes, build them like this, with no icon, 1 set of demolition charges, and 1 mining weapon. Don't do that. You don't have to build it like that. You will still have the right number of models for those Combat Patrol games, and proxying a Genestealer Cult truck for a slightly different Genestealer Cult truck in Combat Patrol, where everyone knows what weapons you have to have and include, that should be fine. Unless there's some really intensive competitive Combat Patrol tournament I don't know about. The 5 Acolytes can be built as 1st and 2nd generation Acolytes, or they can be built as Metamorphs. I would recommend Acolytes. And you can have 2 special weapons, so demo charges are very much the best right now, but mining weapons also look really cool. In 10th edition, unlike previous editions, there is no longer a profile difference between the saw, the drill, and the cutter. And taking the mining weapons also means that you can avoid fights over whether or not the Acolytes get their demo charges, which are once per game, back when they return by Cult Icon, shouldn't, or by Cult Ambush, which I think they should, but it's not set in the hardest of stone. Having mining weapons just avoids that whole fight. You should definitely have one of the models with a Cult Icon, because the Cult Icon lets you bring back dead models as long as there's at least 1 left in the squad. So when 2 of them have got demo charges, or mining weapons, or 1 of each, and 1's got a Cult Icon, that leaves the Acolyte Hybrid Leader, who can have a Hand Flamer and like a whip in the other hand, and 1 other Acolyte, who should also have a Hand Flamer rather than an Auto Pistol. They cost the same points in 10th edition, and a Hand Flamer is better than an Auto Pistol, because a Hand Flamer is D6 shots that automatically hit. An Auto Pistol gives you 1 shot, which will probably miss. And even if points did come back, the Hand Flamers are noticeably better and worth additional points compared to the Auto Pistols. If you really wanted, and this is going to be your set and your army, so you should do what is fun for you, you could build this unit as Metamorphs if you want. They're kind of funky, they've got crab claws and tentacles and whatever that is, but throughout the editions they have been consistently less good on the tabletop, and lore-wise they only appear when the Tyranid fleet is approaching. So if you wanted to represent your cult in the early stages, or rising up by itself, or being discovered and attacked without any Tyranid presence, you wouldn't want Metamorphs in your army because it wouldn't match the lore. The big vehicle is a rock grinder. You can also build it as a regular cult truck. Then it can transport 12 models. As the rock grinder, it can transport 6. If it's the cult truck and you had Metamorphs inside, it can scout as long as you only put Metamorphs inside. Metamorphs plus rock grinder, it can't scout because of how scout works with dedicated transports. The rock grinder is not a dedicated transport, just a transport. The Goliath truck is a dedicated transport. I think the rock grinder is more fun. It's got a cool weapon, it's got the scary drill bits on the front that you use to crush your enemy, and it suits the acolytes that we've got here. Up to 6 models can fit inside, you get 5 acolytes, they can go inside the rock grinder. And then we don't need to worry about anything like scout. They can fit, and it works as a starting army. The aberrants can have a lot of hammers or picks. These are no longer a different profile. I'd liked the hammer profile before because bigger hitting, bigger smash, but I wouldn't worry about it. Whatever you want. The only choice is if you have an improvised road sign for the aberrant leader, or you pick another big hammer. Just pick what you think is cooler. The road sign does give you a mix of profiles for some anti-light infantry, which stops the aberrants getting bogged down where their low number of attacks can't cut through hordes, or you can have more big smashy hammers. The neophytes have a whole host of weapons available. For every 10 of them, you'll get sprues that provide 3 heavy weapons and 3 special weapons. Those are 1 each of a mining laser, a seismic cannon, a heavy stubber as heavy weapons, and as special weapons, a grenade launcher, a weber, and a flamer. Every unit of 10 can take 2 heavy weapons and 2 special weapons. I have a separate video on neophyte building and tactics, but none of the weapons are terrible. Some people really don't like the heavy stubbers. I think they're fine. And then we have the Magos. The Magos has a special ability, which is their psychic attack, that means that an enemy unit is at -1 to shoot. Having the Magos in your army as you're starting out playing 40k at all is great for learning reactions against the enemy. In the lore, the Magos is a really cool leader to have, representing a super psychic 4th generation hybrid, and if you're a long-term player of 40k, and you've maybe watched some of my videos, then you might think, but Von Carmian, you said that the Magos is the worst character, why are you so inconsistent? Well, shut up the doubting voice in my head. Meta is temporary. The Magus was great 6 months ago. Maybe 6 months from now, they will once again be super fun. Or what you could do is you could take the bone sword and the claw from the Acolyte champion that you didn't use, and with an arm swap, you could make the Magos into a Primus. Or just call him a Nexus. She is walking towards the table rather than standing next to the table. We have options. And what really defines the Genestealer Cult are its characters. If you thought the Magos in the Combat Patrol was absolutely terrible, not worth doing anything with, start with them and try a colour scheme. Reason 2 why we don't start with a character, remember, as I mentioned at the start? The second reason is because the characters are basic infantry models with very slight changes. With a mix of neophyte parts and/or acolyte parts, we can make the majority of the Genestealer Cult leaders. The parts we have from the neophyte kit will let us convert a Primus, Locus, Biophagus, Reductus Sabatour, Sanctus, Kellermorph, Iconward, Nexos. I mean, they won't have the table, but that's okay. They're basically a old bald guy with a pistol. And that would leave you 2 left, so I'd suppose you could double up on them, or if you really wanted, you could make Clamavus. Because every cult apparently needs someone with records on their fingers.
I got records on my fingers and I just can't stop. Don't stop!
The Neophyte box comes with 2 bigger 32mm bases that are designed for the models with the heavy weapons, but these can be used for something like the Primus and the Reductus. Other characters have other base sizes. I don't know all the character base sizes off the top of my head, and I'm not going to look them up now and tell you because Games Workshop changes the base sizes so often. What is a 25mm today? Could be a 28.5mm in 6 months' time. You can check the Games Workshop website. Under the unit itself, it tells you the base size that they use, if you can navigate the Games Workshop website in its current state, or you can use Warpedia. That also tells you the unit base size. So how do we convert them? If you want the Locus, you can see it's a dude with a sword, and they have the big symbol on the back of them, so you can cut the large symbol from the top of the banner and put that onto the back of one of the models. Take a spare sword from literally anywhere, or use something like the maul that you get in the Neophyte set. and that can work as a Locus. The rest of that banner can be used for the Biophagus. You see how he has this big stick with like spiky rings? Well, the main part of the Neophyte icon is a stick with 2 spiky bits on it. You could leave it as it is or cut the 2 spikes off the side and glue them onto the top, and then it looks more like a goad or prod. And you'll also want to use the head that has the face covering. That looks very creepy doctory. You don't need to worry about the little familiar with the vial. That's just a token to remind you to use the once per game ability. But the Primus, well, they are a 2nd generation person, but at the moment, and in 8th edition, not 9th edition, they had a toughness of 3, putting their body more in line with the Neophytes. So you could use a Neophyte body. Maybe one of the bodies designed for carrying heavy weapons. They are more hunched and look more acolyte-y, but with proper shoes, so they can be 2nd generation. Add the Acolyte Bone Sword and Claw, and the other hand, use a fancy pistol. You could use the web pistol that's on the Neophyte sprue, and that can work as their poison pistol. The Sanctus is a guy with goggles. We have heads with goggles, and either a knife or a sniper. To make the sniper, you can cut part of a shotgun barrel and attach it to the end of an autogun barrel, and now you have a long flash suppressor on an autogun. Looks a lot like a sniper rifle. I did that with mine, and then also added on a hooded Mechanicus head and a cloak from Mordheim. That's just a thing I had lying around from, the year 1999. The cloak is optional. The Nexos is a guy with a big brain and a pistol, so you can use one of the 3rd generation Neophyte heads with the elongated skull, put that on a body, give him a pistol, doesn't matter what you do with the other hand, and there you go. That's a Nexus. If you have pistols to spare, you can have a Kellermorph, use 2 of the pistols like the auto pistol and the bolt pistol, attach them, have the pistol on the hip, because all of these Neophytes also have auto pistols, and that can be a Kellermorph. It's also pretty easy to cut the arms below the shoulder and glue them onto the side, and there you go. He's firing 2 pistols from one side. And even though my thumbnail has styled the Kellermorph with a cowboy hat, everyone thinks of the Kellermorph with a cowboy hat. The model doesn't actually have a cowboy hat. It's just another bald guy with a bandana over his face. We have those heads in the Neophyte sprue. The Reductus Sabatour is a model with a demo charge. We get in the Neophyte set a blasting charge. The blasting charge on the Neophyte has no additional in-game effect. It's just to remind you that they can use grenades. Grenades is a keyword that they have. So having one model with, say, an auto pistol and that blasting charge arm, that is your Reductus Sabatour right there. An Iconward is essentially just an acolyte with an icon, but a bit more fancy. So what you could do for your own acolytes is use the Neophyte banner for that arm, then you have consistency between your cult icons with the Neophyte cult icon and the Acolyte cult icon, and then use the cult icon from the acolytes that has this slight banner look, add that to a model. And if you're thinking, oh well, for my Neophytes, I want to have a cult icon. Yes, but you get 1 cult icon for every 10 models. So if you have a unit of 20 Neophytes, you only need 1 cult icon. That means you will have 1 spare. So you can use that as an Iconward banner, or cut it up to make a Biophagus stabbing stick. And I'm sure that with or without using the icon staff, you could make a Clamavus, if you wanted. Now here is my converted Locus. That body is the heavy weapon body of a Neophyte. The head is the monopose canoness, because who needs 2 of the exact same model in the exact same pose? That sword arm is a Novitiate's arm, the other arm is a Scutari arm, and the backpack comes from the Scutari set as well. I know it isn't the best looking or the best painted, but I made that. Maybe it looks like a horrible kit bash made by someone who is running a channel about a very expensive hobby, but who really can't afford the models. Or maybe you too can see the beauty in it that my camera has just failed to capture. So by taking 10 Neophytes in the Combat Patrol box, or by using a separate box, you can have most of the Genestealer Cult characters. The only ones you really can't make are the Jackal Alphas, which wants Jackals to go with, and the Patriarch. Even the Abominant can be made from spare Aberrant parts attached to a Neophyte body, or Acolyte body, or just use an Aberrant body and then one of your regular Aberrants, you use a larger Neophyte body attaching all of the Aberrant parts. It works. And buying 1 box of 10 Neophytes is far, way far, so far away that you can't even see it, far cheaper than buying them individually. And conversion opportunity is super great among the Genestealer Cult. It is one of the key selling points of Genestealer Cult. That is a reason why to start Genestealer Cult. but I know we're already on the how to start a Genestealer Cult army. But $32.50 for 10 is a lot cheaper than £19 or £20 for one model. And that's without any of the discounts you can get through my affiliate links compared to buying from Games Workshop. And if you only wanted 1 or 2 extra characters, the truck, or rock grinder in this case, comes with spare crew models that are meant to sit on the back. They have no real in-game effect, and there is a full neophyte body that you can convert into whatever character you want. You'll just need to get a base for them. Now, whether you're converting up your characters or not, as they look an awful lot like the models they're deployed with, the neophytes and the acolytes, it may be worth having distinct colours for them. So if you were to paint the suit ribbing on all of your models black, but on the characters, you could have the Kellermorph in white, the Reductus Sabatour in red, the Nexos in light green, the Primus in light blue, things like that. So they stand out both for you and your opponent to see on the tabletop. And it also gives you a cool look of, yeah, those are the NPCs, and these are the named characters that are part of the hero set. Now, even if you didn't want to take all of a neophyte box to make 10 characters, you could use the remaining arms from the acolytes to make thinner looking acolytes, or use the metamorph arms. All you would need then is slightly bigger bases, because they use 32mm bases, whereas most of the neophytes are on 25mm bases. The kits are very compatible, and you don't need to worry about, oh, this person got a slightly bigger arm for their body. That is standard Genestealer Cult stuff, without going full aberrant. So the Genestealer Cult has free reign on conversions in a way that only an orc faction does otherwise. Also, Games Workshop often gives away a model of the month. A lot of the times, these are a human. So you could build them in store, then take them home, take off the arms and head, and any spare parts you have, and there are a lot of spare parts on these Genestealer Cult kits, add them on, and you will have a unique collection of characters. Whatever character you want, even the Clamavus, you can get it from a human body and bits. So as well as the option to use the human models of the month as neophytes, acolytes, or characters, we can also use all of the other human range of the 41st millennium. Like the regular humans, not the superhumans. Admech, if you get some Skitarii Rangers, they cost the same price as a neophyte box for the same number of models. They're pretty customizable in themselves. There isn't amazing crossover compatibility between the neophyte sprue and the Admech sprue. It can work. I have made it work. It looks pretty cool if you want some variation. And that also lets you use the Cult of the Bladed Cog, who very much like infiltrating the Admech rather than generic Imperial Society. Now, there are no special rules for them right now. There were in 9th edition, and presumably when we get the Genestealer Cult Codex, there will be one detachment that is kind of their theme. That theme being, I have an invulnerable save because of bionics, and also fancy weird weapons. So at least for the moment, no special rules, but it is a cool theme. You could use the new Cadians or Krieg, or if you wanted to go really far back, the old plastic Catachan models. If you just want some bodies, the Catachans are £22.50 for 10. That is £10 cheaper than a neophyte box. But the sculpts are very, very old. But t-shirts and bandanas? That could work. And using Catachans would also give you knives and swords if you want to convert up a Primus or a Sanctus assassin. All of these human kits also come with radio packs. That can be a cool looking icon bearer proxy in a neophyte unit, or be part of a Clamavus sound system. You can use the new Cadians, but they cost £30. The new Cadian models have quite a lot of detail on them, which isn't amazing when you're painting up a horde, but they are an option. You could also use the older Cadian models. There are a lot of them going around online. Fenris Workshop does have a second-hand section, and you can have those sent to the United States. Don't forget those affiliate links in the description, underneath my Ko-Fi link, which is where you can give me tip money. But any of these Imperial Guard regiments will give you a Hive Cult look. That's a theme for the Genestealer Cult when you're infiltrating the Astra Militarum. You're going into the Guard, corrupting the Guard, and stealing their tanks, which are actually our tanks. And this can be represented on the tabletop with the Brood Brothers rule. That lets you take Imperial Guard units and tanks and regiment things and all sorts of that. And I have a video with recommendations on which Brood Brother units to take, so you could expand your Genestealer Cult into the Imperial Guard. Or if you already have an existing Imperial Guard army, you could appropriate their tanks. And then you can use the tanks from your old army in your new army, meaning you can get to 1,000 points or 2,000 points much faster. On the Neophyte sprue, you get enough weapons to equip 20 models. You will just be one heavy and one special weapon short of the maximum allowed. But if you have the Cadians or even the Catachans, there's some more special weapons, because you get one of each kind of heavy weapon and one of each kind of special weapon, and you can have 2 special weapons and 2 heavy weapons per 10. You also get 19 heads, if I've counted correctly, on this sprue of 10 models. So if you didn't want to even go the Katachan route, if you can 3D print 10 generic human bodies in the same scale, that'll be perfect. Then, just from the combat patrol, you will have 30 fully equipped neophytes. And don't feel you have to limit yourself to Games Workshop models. Genestealer Cult can be very weird. I've used old Robotech models for this Sentinel and this Ridge Runner. All of the weapons look right, and they're the right scale and on the correct base. I won't be able to use them at official Games Workshop tournaments, but that's a very small price to pay compared to, you know, the actual comparative money price. Now, how do we grow our army from here? As I've said, this is the core of the army, so you can just get more of the same, assuming you like painting up those models. Or if you like the vehicles like the Rock Grinder, you can get the bikes and the Ridge Runner. Both of those are currently quite strong units. That may change, but if you like the style of being fast and having a lot of toughness from the armor, they can be a great support to the core of the army. To lead the faction, you can have the Patriarch, our only epic hero. He's currently only sold with the Primus and the Magus model, but you may be able to pick them up secondhand. Or if you're enjoying the lore and want to have your army more reflect the lore, you could get some Genestealers. They have new models out, which are compatible both as pure strain Genestealers and as Genestealers that come as part of a Tyranid invasion. And that will let you finish out the 5-generation brood cycle, as the first child of a 4th-generation hybrid is a Genestealer, a pure strain Genestealer, letting the cycle begin again. Now let's look at some starting army lists and how they can work. The first one is 1500 points, a very good size to play, my favourite size in fact, but if you were to play 1000 points, then this gives you enough units to have choice over what you include on your army, and it isn't just you putting the same units on the table again and again. This list is formed of 2 combat patrols and an extra set of aberrants. The 2 sets of 5 acolytes become a squad of 10, they can go with the Magos in a truck, and in later turns they can get out and charge with mining weapons. The Magos gives them some resistance to shooting and psychic attacks, but the shooting resistance won't save them against Overwatch. This is the Overwatch stratagem, everyone has access to it, and the Magos only reduces enemy shooting in the enemy shooting phase, not when Overwatch is used in your own movement or charge phase. The Focus of Adoration lets the squad use heroic intervention for free, so that's the Magos and the Acolytes with her. So if an enemy moves onto an objective that you are contesting, you can charge in the enemy charge phase and take it back immediately in preparation to score it in your own turn. You could also build these acolytes as metamorphs. You would lose the mining weapons but gain more hand flamers, and then the truck could scout. There's a squad of 20 neophytes that can pop up and kill enemies. We can also have 10 neophytes on the home objective. They can generate command points immediately because they're on the board and they have their special ability. And we have 10 other neophytes that can wait a bit longer and then pop into an open central objective or reinforce where needed. The Rock Grinder will smash. That's its job. Now you see there's a Biophagus in the list. If you swap the top part of the banner, as I've said, for the end of the staff on the Magos, you can get the Biophagus style Injector Goad, or if you have some Skaven items lying around, a Man-Thing catcher on the end, looks pretty good. And then we also do a head swap for the Magos head for this Neophyte head. With Inscrutable Cunning, that lets you infiltrate with 10 aberrants. They can smash from turn 1. You deploy them 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone, behind cover ideally. If you get the first turn, get stuck in, my mutant lads and lasses. If you go second, then they should be hidden and have the profile to weather most fire. Then smash. The 5 other aberrants can advance onto a central objective, hit any enemies that got there first, and then they're a solid enough wall that the enemy will have to force themselves through to get that objective back. Alternatively, here's a very different list that is 1000 points that is a level that many new Genestealer Cult players often aim for. So we have the Combat Patrol set, plus buying a box of 10 Neophytes to make a Biophagus, Primus, Reductus and Sanctus. And another 5 of those Neophyte bodies you can add the Metamorph arms to make 5 Metamorphs. This also leaves 1 model left over, so you could have a Clamavis or another character that you could switch out for a character like the Magos if you don't like them, or you want to try something different. The points will change. They're going to change in January 2024, but for now, something like this works. The Sanctus or Reductus can fight or stay back on the home objectives. As lone operatives, they can't be shot outside of 12 inches, even if you have line of sight. The Primus is with 20 Neophytes for full rerolls to hit on all of their weapons, and you will have enough extra heavy weapons from the additional Neophyte box to give 3 grenade launchers, a Weber, 3 mining lasers, and a seismic cannon. I'm not saying those are the best choices, but that would work. If you wanted a Clamorvus instead of a Magos, you could split the Neophytes into 2 squads of 10. 1 unit stays on the home objective with the Clamorvus, who can deny the enemy deep strikers, while the Neophytes are generating command points. But that would make the Primus less effective. If you're including the Magos, put them with the Metamorphs in the Rock Grinder. It can't scout, but it can be a mobile hand flamer tower, and when the Metamorphs and Magos get out, there will be a little bit of protection from enemy shooting. Alternatively, just have the Magos by themselves in that Rock Grinder, and they can be deposited onto an objective, or into a table quarter to complete secondary objectives. And the 5 Acolytes, they want to have demo charges. The reason being, they can pop up with tunnel crawlers 3 inches away and blow up whatever is the scariest thing in the enemy army. They will probably die straight afterwards, but they'll have a lot of impact with their once per game bombs. And at the same time, they can be scoring secondary actions like behind enemy lines and table quarters. The Aberrants with the Biophagus can wait and then rapid ingress against the enemy, or they can run up the field at the central objective, and there are way more options and tactics than that. I do a lot of Genestealer Cult content regularly, so subscribe. Did the subscribe button just below the player light up? You can check if it did. Now that we have a 1000 point army, here is another video with even more detail on how to play the Genestealer Cult at that size. Have a great day with Genestealer Cult in 40k.